Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has thrown his weight behind the removal of statues and monuments of past oppressors. During a virtual address on Heritage Day, Ramaphosa said any symbol, monument or activity that glorifies racism has no place in democratic South Africa and should be repositioned and relocated. Newzroom Afrika's Hlongwane filed this report.
Paul Kruger's controversial statue, which stands in Church Square in Pretoria, might soon be coming down. He was president of the South African Republic from 1883 to 1900. It's been ring-fenced permanently because of it being defaced and damaged by angry protesters. At the grounds of the Union buildings, mounted on a horse is Louis Botha, who was Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa from 1907 to 1910. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he supports the removal of colonial and apartheid statues such as this one of Paul Kruger. The call has once again ignited debate about the statues among South Africans, and here is what some of them had to say.
It is unfair because this is our past, it is our history. Our kids, they must learn from these statues where we come from, where we are going. So, no, it is wrong for government to remove these statues.
These statues are very educational, and our next generation needs to know what happened to their ancestors and their great-grandfathers. So they should continue listening our next generation. So, yeah, exactly that.
Historian Thandolwe Tusipuye is of a different view and says wide rule reminders should not be in public places.
All the symbols, that represented that regime of Hitler, they've been put in particular places. They're not displayed in public, because it is an insult to the Jews. And it would be an insult to go in Germany today and see the statues of Hitler adorned all around. So it is an insult to the African people to see all these statues of all these settlers adorned in this country.
At the same time, former President Nelson Mandela's towering statue at the Union buildings is one which attracts people from different backgrounds hoping to take a picture of it as this represents the dawn of democracy and reconciliation. For Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, I'm Hlongwane in Pretoria.
So to speak to us about the President's announcement and the significance of public history such as statues and monuments, we're joined by Dr. Ali Hlongwane, researcher at the Wits History Group Department and author of Public History and Culture in South Africa. Very good morning to you, Doc. Thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Now, if colonial statues or monuments were to be removed, where would they move them to?
Well, there are different views. First, let's agree that there are many that have been removed before. The statue of Servuti was removed, in the municipality around Hlongwane here in Gauteng, and it was removed, interesting enough, by a government or a municipality led by the DA. Who are suddenly the ones who are complaining about the statement from the president that some of these statues should be removed. The statue of Stradom in Pretoria too, was removed and replaced by a monument commemorating women. So the agenda really, it's not just to remove statues, but to democratize public history in South Africa so that the histories of the majority, by the majority we mean the working people, the women, African people in particular, should dominate the memory landscape of the country because this is an African country. At the moment, the balance is problematic. It continues to reflect white domination, and we need to reverse white domination. So my view is that there are two approaches to it. There will be those that communities will put pressure to have them removed, but the agenda is also to diversify and change the memory landscape of the country. Another example, why is this country still having a building called Union Building in Pretoria? That name should have been removed long ago because what does it tell us? It is not just history, as I said, two commentators that were interviewed by your colleagues saying these statues teach us. They don't teach us. They remind us that we are a conquered people. We are a dehumanized people. Teaching is a completely different agenda, and you don't teach through monuments, because monuments are triumphalist. That's why you have men on horseback looking down upon people. We need a different aesthetic in the memorialization, in creating new public histories that speaks in a humane way to the diverse histories of this country.
So, Doc, would you agree that opponents of President Cyril Ramaphosa have a foot to stand on when they say that the president shouldn't worry about moving monuments or statues?
No, they don't have. They want him to be one-dimensional. Yes, they have a point in terms of addressing corruption in the country, homelessness, unemployment. Equally, the history and the memory of the country should be addressed side by side with those, because they are equally dehumanizing the same way as homelessness and unemployment dehumanize. But of course, we should know that the Freedom Front Plus and the DA in particular have a particular agenda. They are defending interests of a small constituency that supports them. They are not looking at the country as a whole.
Let's talk about a specific statue, the Paul Kruger statue on Church Street in the capital city of Pretoria. In your opinion, should it be removed, or should it be moved to a place where there's a museum where similar statues are all housed?
Look, it would make sense if they are moved into a museum, which is where they belong, and not into the public space, because the need for the public space is to create a new consciousness that moves from the problems of the past and shapes a new society that South Africans are continuously debating to say what should it look like. Who does Paul Kruger represent? He represents one section of our society, but also it is a triumphalist statue that celebrates the conquest. It is not a humanist statue that says we are all people.
And Doctor, which symbols or monuments out there could you say or could be regarded as glorifying racism?
Well, the Voortrekker monument, for instance, it's free, and even the tour guides, if you go there, they still interpret that history in the same way that the people who created that monument as victors, referred to Inkosi Dingane as treacherous, and then saw themselves as Voortrekkers, as so-called pioneers. It does not help us to create a new society. It still freezes into the old society. However, in the same vein, I do acknowledge that people who interact with the statues, whether they are progressive or reactionary, bring a particular reading to it, and that reading itself may change the meaning of that statue. So when people protest and want to deface statues, that itself is dialogue with that monument. And it is people trying to write an alternative perspective on it, particularly if removing them completely is not feasible. Society has to be in agreement in a way, because just to polarize society for the sake of polarizing society is also not helpful for people to move forward.
Okay, so let's just say if some of these monuments or statues are actually removed or even taken down for good, will that in any way help in eradicating poverty and inequality that you spoke about earlier?
Well, look, I mean, the struggle to deal with poverty should be multifrontal. There should be an agenda to address illiteracy in this country. The numbers are still shocking. There should be a strategy to address homelessness and unemployment. There should be a strategy to address unequal ownership of land. It becomes disingenuous for opponents of the new history and the progressive history to say, no, forget about changing names, you are wasting money, and focus on creating employment, because we are not economic beings, we are social beings. Just as we need to have food, water, and shelter, we also need a public space that is humanizing, not dehumanizing. So we should not separate challenges of poverty and unemployment from the challenges of changing the memory terrain in South Africa, so that the African story in particular is remembered.
My final question, Doctor, is about the Kruger National Park. I mean, the name itself is the biggest wildlife park that we have here in South Africa, and it's named Kruger National Park. So in line with the removal of statues, etc., should the name Kruger National Park also be addressed and changed to a more meaningful name for black or all South Africans?
My view is that, yes, it should, including what is called Port Elizabeth. Why are we having Port Elizabeth? Why are we, still having Pretoria itself? Those names should be contested and through the process of contestation and debate, they should be changed. Because if the name remains, it means, what does it mean to us? It means the memory of Kruger stands above the memories of those people who were kicked out of that land to be turned into what it is. And we know that there are still unresolved land claims there. And the agenda of putting these old colonial names is still part of that old ideology that there was empty land that the colonialists found. But we know that there was no empty land. That is just a myth deliberately created to say we did not steal the land, we found no one and took it.
Dr. Ali, thank you for your time. That was Wits History Group Department and author of Public History and Culture in South Africa, Dr. Ali Hlongwane. A big thank you to him for his time.